Hello! In case you couldn't tell from reading the title of this video, this is part 2 of an entire Mario and Luigi series review. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, there should be a card right up there in the corner where my Korg Funko Pop is. So go watch part 1 and then come back to this video so we can continue from where we left off. In this video, we're going to be covering the Nintendo DS games, Partners in Time and Bowser's Inside Story, plus the 3DS remake of Bowser's Inside Story. So, without further ado, let's get back to the show.
Well, I guess that means we can move on to the next one, and that would be Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, which came out for the Nintendo DS in 2005. And as I mentioned near the beginning, this is the one that I had absolutely no experience with whatsoever, even though I'd been aware of its existence for well over a decade. And I don't know why, but for some reason, I always had it in my head that this game was the one that everybody loved. Like, this was supposed to be the fan favorite. But nowadays, I hardly hear anybody talk about it. It seemed to get mostly great reviews at the time, but maybe the games that came after were just so much better that it made people change their minds on this one and look back on it less fondly. Kind of like what happened with Super Mario 3D World. But let's be real, that game wasn't even great to begin with. This one, though? I think it's pretty sweet and extremely underrated. But before we can get into why, let's take a look at that plot.
Partners in Time begins with a flashback to the Mushroom Kingdom of the past, where we're introduced to a race of alien creatures called the Shroobs. And the game really wants to drive home just how creepy these things are. There was this creepy planet floating alone. Just creepy daydreamers, right? At last, they fixed their creepy gazes on a distant world. Well, with that amount of repetition, I'm guessing these guys are kind of weird. Oh, I mean, creepy. The Shroobs are looking for a new place to call home, and they set their sights on the Mushroom Kingdom and launch a full-scale attack. Meanwhile, in the present, Professor Egad has built a time machine that runs off the power of something called the Cobalt Star. I guess that explains how he was able to send Luigi back in time to the events of the first Luigi's Mansion.
You don't remember that, do you? Well, you probably would if they didn't put this friggin' game on the 3DS. It's sideways.
So Princess Peach is apparently so impressed with Egad's work that she decides to use the machine to travel to the past, and Toadsworth, fearing for Peach's safety, worries himself into a state of shroom shock.
This castle's so big, I sometimes get lost. And then I cry a little.
F's in the chat for Toad. Anyway, after Mario brings Toadsworth a refresh room, the time machine returns, but only a Shroob comes out, and Peach is nowhere to be seen. This also causes a time hole to appear in the garden, allowing Mario and Luigi to travel to the past in search of Peach. Professor Egad also sends a little briefcase creature named Stuffwell to assist them and act as their inventory. Wait, so where was Mario keeping those mushrooms before? Well, when they make their way to Holly Jolly Village, the bros are taken down by a horde of Shroobs. And while this is going on, younger versions of Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Bowser are attempting to escape in the Koopa Cruiser when baby Mario and baby Luigi are sent down to rescue their adult selves. But once they're brought aboard, the Koopa Cruiser is attacked by the leader of the Shroobs, Princess Shroob, causing it to crash into baby Bowser's castle. After Mario and Luigi reunite with their younger selves, the two sets of brothers later come across a piece of the Cobalt Star. When they return to the present to show it to Egad, the Shroob from earlier, now encased inside of a large holding tube, starts reacting negatively to the shard's energy. From this, Egad deduces that the Shroobs must be weak to the Cobalt Star's power, so now it's up to Mario, Luigi, and their infant counterparts to travel through the past, find Princess Peach, put the Cobalt Star back together, and defeat the Shroobs once and for all. It's certainly a much grander adventure than Superstar Saga, but despite what the setup might lead you to believe, the time travel aspect doesn't really have a lot of significance in the story. It's pretty much used as a plot device to establish the main conflict, and an excuse to have the adult versions of Mario and Luigi team up with their baby versions. There are hardly any moments in this game where changes made in the past also affect the future. The only time I can recall something like this happening is when the brothers visit a younger Egad, and his lab is severely damaged by volcanic rocks, which rearranges the future Egad's memories and gives him the idea to build the Hydrogush 4000 to pour water into a time hole and stop the volcano from erupting. I do like how the Hydrogush shares design similarities to Flood, another water-based creation of EGAD's, even if it is triggering my Super Mario Sunshine-related PTSD. In hindsight, time travel stories are pretty difficult to get right. There's a lot of rules you need to follow and details you need to be consistent with. It can be done really well, but without proper attention or care, it'll spell disaster for you and sacrifice. In the case of Partners in Time, I think the writers chose not to use any time travel story cliches because they didn't want the narrative to get too complicated. I still think they should have given it more importance in the grand scheme of things, but it's a very admirable choice nonetheless. I also have to appreciate the game's tone for just how much darker it is than the previous one, and that can be attributed to the very presence of the Shroobs. They're cold and merciless creatures that only know death and destruction. They capture innocent toads, drain them of their essence, and use it to power their ships, leaving their victims trapped inside these trees to slowly die. That's incredibly horrific and extremely disturbing. I love it! Mario games don't usually get this dark and twisted, so when something like Partners in Time comes along, I welcome it with open arms. Where the story sort of falls apart, however, is when we get to the end. Basically, when Princess Peach arrived in the past, she was attacked by Princess Shroob's older twin sister, the elder Princess Shroob. But Peach managed to trap her inside the Cobalt Star and shattered it into pieces. So all this time, we assumed that collecting all the shards and putting the Cobalt Star back together would help us defeat the Shroobs, when really, it allows the elder Princess Shroob to escape. From a story perspective, the Cobalt Star actually benefiting the Shroobs is a great idea, and they could have had it so that Princess Shroob was secretly manipulating us into reassembling the Cobalt Star for her so that even when she's defeated, she can come back stronger. That would have made for a great, oh shoot, moment when the player realizes they were actually helping the bad guys this whole time. But her having an older twin sister? I don't know, it's not really built up well and sort of comes out of left field. At least it makes for a better climax than the actual final boss with Bowser, which is downright pointless if you ask me. Seriously, the game's over. Why do we need this? But aside from that, I generally found the plot to be a little more entertaining than Superstar Saga, and it has a much wider array of moments ranging from funny, to wholesome, to unnerving, to, oh yeah, this game came out in 2005. Anytime Mario and Luigi play with the babies is like watching videos of puppies. You just can't help but go,
Oh, that is so freaking cute!
I also chuckled quite a bit when this gate in Star Hill commends Mario for his bravery, and then tells him to go on a diet. A bit rude to comment on his weight like that, but he's still a wise gate. I think the strangest moment in the entire game has to be when you come across these Hammer Brothers in Vim Factory. They each have an antenna on their helmets that puts them under the Shroob's control, and for some reason it also causes them to use Leet speak? We are te Shroob allies, we rock soar you and then raffle, then you am cry. So, Shroob language translated into English is about as coherent as a NeoGAF form. Oh, mid to late 2000s internet, how I love to hate you, and hate to love you. We must obey all orders. We like to pwn noobs for te master Shroobzors.
Did I have a stroke?
But with the jump to the Nintendo DS, how does Partners in Time differ from its predecessor in the gameplay department? Well, exploration and combat are pretty much exactly the same, only now you travel between the past and the future by jumping into time holes that appear as the game continues. Mario and Luigi are now mapped to the A and B buttons respectively at all times. Meanwhile, Baby Mario is mapped to the X button, and Baby Luigi is mapped to the Y button. On the overworld, Mario and Luigi can carry the babies on their backs or throw them off for you to control them separately. Then you can switch between the two sets of bros whenever you want, leading to moments where both the babies and adults will have to hit blocks or activate switches to affect the other's progress, making for some very inventive and more in-depth puzzle solving than the previous game. Each set of bros also has their own unique bros actions to perform. The spin jump from the last game is given to the adults, but only Baby Mario can use a hammer on the overworld. Baby Luigi gets a drill technique that lets him and Baby Mario go underground, move under gates and other hazards, and dig up beans like in Superstar Saga. Then you can trade them in at this bad shop that Fawful runs in the basement of Peach's castle to get some extra special gear.
It's so great to see him again. I didn't really understand his appeal at first, but after beating Superstar Saga, I get it now. And I love him!
Adult Mario and Luigi also have this new Bros Ball ability that lets them go full-on Sonic the Hedgehog and roll up into a ball to move faster and slip under low ceilings. They can even interact with the babies while using Bros actions to make even more things happen, like spin jumping into them so they can reach higher platforms, and rolling into them with the Bros Ball to flatten them like pancakes so they can move under even lower ceilings. And since this game was made for the DS, both screens are used to some capacity. The bottom screen is where most of the action and exploration takes place, while the top screen acts as a map that does a much better job at showing you where you are and where important events are taking place than the first game, and also switches focus to the babies when they're left on their own. But for an early DS game, I was shocked at just how little the touchscreen was utilized. Apparently when this game was in development, the only things Alpha Dream knew about the DS before it was officially revealed were that it had 4 face buttons and 2 screens. They probably didn't realize one of them was a touchscreen until later on, because the only part of the game that uses it is when you have to clean off Toadbert's drawing, and it happens so late into the game that it felt so sudden when it popped up. What even is this stuff you have to clean off anyway? Did somebody run out of toilet paper? At least the combat stays consistent. I know I said it was pretty much exactly the same as before, but that's not to say it hasn't had its fair share of modifications. For one thing, the Bros attacks from the last game have been turned into Bros items, and they don't require Bro points to use, you just need to have them in your inventory. You have more basic ones like the Green Shell, the Bro Flower, which might as well be called the Fire Flower, and the Ice Flower, debuting 4 years before its new Super Mario Bros. Wii counterpart. But my favorites include the Copy Flower, which makes clones of the Mario Brothers and lets them rack up tons of damage until you miss a button and break the chain, the Pocket Chomp, which has the Bros riding a chain chomp back and forth across the screen, a nice little callback to the baby's special item from Mario Kart Double Dash, and the Mix Flower that lets all 4 Bros combine their fireballs into one giant fireball that can potentially annihilate your foes. As for normal attacks, well, Baby Mario and Baby Luigi can fight alongside their adult counterparts, or by themselves if you're controlling them on their own. When both sets of brothers are together, you can perform piggyback moves, letting the baby attack first and then the adult. This also applies to the Bros items, like having the adults take turns kicking a green shell at a bad guy, while the baby's riding on it and deals more damage when the shell collides with the enemy. When I said I wish the battle system in Superstar Saga had more variety to it, this is what I was hoping for. Something that allows for different means of approaching battles and a greater variety of actions to perform thanks to the inclusion of Bros items. This ultimately fixes the issue of repetition that was present in the previous game, and while I did end up resorting to some of the same 2 or 3 strategies over and over once I figured out which Bros items could be exploited to deal large amounts of damage, I never felt as if the combat was getting stale at any point. I do think some areas can feel a wee bit overcrowded with enemies. I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure more bad guys are present on the overworld here than in Superstar Saga, and sometimes you can deal with a lot of stupidly powerful enemies earlier in the game than you probably should. Not because you want to, but the game just puts them there, and they're not always easy to avoid. I must have fought more battles in this game than I did in the first one, and by the end, I got so tired that I wound up doing my best to avoid them as much as possible. Like calls from my telemarketer. But in the end, I don't think it's enough to tarnish the game's quality. There are still minigames to look forward to, though not as many as the first game. The story has a lot of fun twists and turns to keep you hooked, even if parts of it could have been better and more impactful. The worlds are more fun to explore, the battle system has some much needed variety, and overall, I think Partners in Time is a pretty big step up over its predecessor. It certainly is in terms of presentation. I'll admit, for as much as I love Yoko's style, her soundtracks can get a bit samey, so some of the songs present in this game end up sounding similar to tracks from Superstar Saga, but Partners in Time is still a joy to my ears and has plenty of standout hits like Yoshi Mountain, Star Hill, and Gritzy Desert, which even got a remix in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Graphically, it's not too different from the first game, but the colors are much more vibrant, and the areas have more unique set pieces. I especially love Holly Jolly Village's Christmas setting, very appropriate for this video, though I wish there were more blatant visual differences between the past and the future, aside from the obvious damage left behind by the Shroobs. Does anyone else think Mario's walking animation looks a little weird too? From the side specifically? It just doesn't sit well with me, and it almost kind of looks like it was made for a fan game rather than an actual Mario game. And this plant kind of seems a bit sus, doesn't it?
Despite the critical acclaim it got when it was released, this game ended up selling about 500,000 copies less than its predecessor. It's not the worst selling game in the series, far from it. That'll come later. But I guess in Alpha Dream's eyes, it wasn't enough to warrant a 3DS remake like Superstar Saga. Well, regardless, I still think Partners in Time is criminally overlooked and well worth your time and money.
I wish and star have game.
Oh. Well, thanks for keeping it brief.
Remember when I said I thought Partners in Time was the one everybody loved? Well, if critical and fan reception is anything to go by, that distinction would have to go to Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. Not gonna lie though, I've got a bit of a bone to pick with this game because, well, look at the box art. You've got Mario, Luigi, Bowser, and this little yellow circle thing in front of this plain white background. It wasn't as chaotic or colorful as the other games, but for the time, you could say it was to get players thinking about what sort of game they were in for. You might look at this and think, well, what's Bowser got to do with this? Is he going to be the hero? All these questions could flood your mind, and the cover's just like, I don't know. Guess you'll just have to play and see for yourself. Maybe that's not exactly what they were going for, but at the very least, it was vague enough to pique your interest. Then, for some reason, they decided to stick with this template for Dream Team and Paper Jam's box art, which just seemed lazy and uninspired by comparison. Now, look at the Superstar Saga remake. Look at this beautiful recreation of the GBA cover. Doesn't it just get you excited to relive the memories you had with the original? Well, here's the kicker. Every single region uses this genuine work of art as the game's cover, except Japan and North America. Wanna know what they got instead? That damn white background. Why do I feel like I'm looking at Mario and Luigi's mugshots?
But that's just the packaging. I'm more interested in the game itself, and Mario and Luigi fans generally seem to agree that this is the high point of the series. I distinctly remember when this game was announced at E3 2009. God, what a great time to be a Mario fan that was. I still didn't know much about the other Mario and Luigi games back then, but the idea of traveling around the insides of Bowser's body was... I don't remember how I felt, actually, but I was 12 years old and the word vor meant nothing to me, so I probably thought the game sounded cool.
Bowser, that long-time bad guy, really does suck.
Oh, really? Is that how he took your job? My brother ended up getting it for his birthday that summer. In fact, this is his copy that I'm holding right here. He let me borrow it to show off in this video. And I remember getting through the first half hour of it, and then just putting it down and going back to Thousand Year Door for the 50th time. Like I said, I was 12. I had the attention span of a can of soup.
But I finally got around to beating this game, and if it didn't feel like Christmas already, it certainly will if you're into inflation, because toads across the Mushroom Kingdom have been infected with something called the blorbs, which causes them to inflate like balloons and roll around uncontrollably. Except for this guy, that's just what he looks like. This is the result of them eating blorb mushrooms, which were sold to them by a mysterious figure in a white cloak. So, Princess Peach holds an emergency meeting to figure out how to solve the crisis. During the meeting, Bowser bursts in and offers his services, but Mario wipes the floor with him, and with assistance from this star sprite named Starlo, Peach sends the Koopa King right out the window. After Kamek gives him his strength back, Bowser wakes up in a dense forest and eventually comes across the white-cloaked figure, who's so clearly Fawful that the game doesn't waste time in revealing who it is. So Fawful offers Bowser a lucky mushroom, which is actually a vacuum mushroom, claiming it could help him beat Mario. Never one to turn down such an offer, Bowser eats the mushroom and ends up getting a rumbly in his tumbly, oh bother, causing him to inhale everything in sight. When he returns to Peach's castle, he uses this power to suck up Mario and his friends, sending them all throughout the insides of his body. While everyone's trying to figure out what's going on, Fawful uses this opportunity to brainwash Bowser's minions and take over his castle. Later, when the Mario Brothers reunite with Peach, the game suddenly realizes, oh yeah, we need another magical star-shaped thingamadookie for you to learn about. This is when Peach reveals that Fawful is looking for something called the Dark Star, which could give evil beings the power to rule the world. But the star sprites sealed it far below the surface of Toad Town to keep it from falling into the wrong hands, and Peach is the only person capable of breaking the seal and releasing it. I'm not sure if there were hints I might have missed before getting to this point, but I felt that the Dark Star's introduction didn't come as naturally as the Bean Stars or the Cobalt Stars, and that it was only added for the sake of tradition. But they do some pretty cool things with it later on, so for that to happen, Fawful uses his magic to pull Peach out of Bowser's body and puts her in a machine to extract her energy and break the seal around the Dark Star himself. I'm not sure what the point of giving Toads the Blorbs or Bowser the Vacuum Mushroom was, but seeing him try to hold her up is pretty funny. I'm guessing he relies more on magic than physical strength. Either that, or Peach seriously needs to lay off the Hot Pockets. With all the pieces in place, Fawful manages to find the Dark Star and takes it to Peach's castle, where he puts up a blockade to keep our heroes from reaching him. Then after Mario and Luigi fake being sick to get Dr. Toadley's intern to let them go in and see him, this is one of my favorite moments in the game by the way, the doctor informs them that 3 star cures will be needed not only to tear down the blockade, but by combining them together into the Miracle Cure, insert Dr. Mario joke here, it can also get rid of the Blorbs and potentially destroy the Dark Star. But in order to get the star cures, they'll need to retrieve them from the star sages. TLDR, Fawful's the bad guy, and you need to stop him. Bowser's inside story gets pretty wild, man. You know how I said they do some cool things with the Dark Star later in the game? Well, there's a point where Bowser actually swallows it, and then the Dark Star munches on parts of his DNA and manifests itself into a dark clone of Bowser that copies his every move. And I'm willing to bet this is the game that made people love Fawful so much. Before he was either a bumbling henchman or a sketchy badge salesman, but now he's a legitimate threat. Nobody can reference old Nintendo memes and make them sound as freaky as he can, that's for sure. Rounding out the cast is a slew of new characters such as Midbus, whose speech patterns were inspired by American dubs of kung fu movies, and Brock Monsieur, who I imagine sounding like the French taunter from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries!
Perhaps the most prominent new character of the bunch is Starlo, acting as Mario and Luigi's assistant for this game. I used to not like her as a kid, but nowadays I don't hate her, but I still don't really like her either. She has something to contribute, and she can be funny during moments when she's toying with Bowser. Maybe I just find her a bit bland and kind of annoying? Okay, yeah, she's pretty annoying. But the story is all around a pretty damn good time. I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reason why this is so many people's favorite Mario and Luigi game was because it has some of the funniest moments in the series. I'd be right with them if that was the case. You know why the Goombas' only means of attack are just walking in a straight line? Well, apparently that's what they're trained to do in Goomba Boot Camp.
You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of this old College Humor short where a bunch of Mario enemies talk about all the ways that Bowser forces them to attack Mario, and they realize just how impractical they are in hindsight. Do you ever see that short? Because it's like, you know how the boos always freeze in place and turn invisible when Mario looks at them? Or when the Hammer Brothers throw their hammers, they always throw them in an arc right above his head and instead of just straight at him. Yeah, not really useful. I'm not sure what Bowser's deal is. Even in this game, there's a bit where some of Bowser's minions make fun of him behind his back. And yeah, when you really think about it, Bowser's kind of a dumbass.
Going back to Partners in Time for a second, while I did have some issues with its plot, I personally think it did a better job at having story events play out naturally over the course of the game. I also can't recall there being any moments that felt like padding for the sake of making the game longer, except for the final battle, because this one definitely has a few of those. However, in terms of the writing and overall narrative, I can easily say that Bowser's Inside Story is more entertaining, whether it's embracing the surreal nature of its setup or lightly touching on this interspecies relationship between a Boo and a Koopa Troopa, which, good for them, I hope they live a very happy life together. This game isn't afraid to stoop to the lowest form of silliness or the most immature levels of humor just to get a laugh out of you, as long as it's making you smile and keeping you hooked, which it very much succeeds at.
Mario pounded me at Peaches.
Well, I'm sure you enjoyed it, you kinky bastard. Bowser isn't just given a bigger role in the plot, but he's also central to the game's main gimmick. Mario and Luigi travel throughout the insides of his body, which is split off into multiple areas that you can easily travel between by selecting them on a map. Each section is laid out like a 2D side-scroller and requires you to partake in a mix of platforming and puzzle solving to get around. I don't like how the map isn't always visible on the top screen during these sections, since you have to stop and press the select button to pull it up, which is kind of intrusive. But you won't be using Mario and Luigi for the entire game because Bowser's got his own stuff to do. You can take control of the Koopa King whenever he's available, and during these sections, Bowser can punch with the X button and breathe fire with the Y button to roast everything in sight. Like Sharon's pie. There are also these Chak Road portals that he can use to teleport to different parts of the overworld. Bowser's gameplay is relegated to these areas, but eventually Mario and Luigi can make their way out of his body and travel around the Mushroom Kingdom as well. Over time, they'll regain most of the same abilities they had in the first two games, but on the overworld, you'll find gas pumps that Mario can suck up helium from to inflate like a balloon. This game really loves inflation. And then Luigi can use him to jump higher and float across large gaps. The blue shell from New Super Mario Bros. Kinda makes a return here too, since Mario can wear it after hitting a shell block, and have Luigi smack him with his hammer to hit switches from a distance.
I think it's safe to say, though, that Mario and Luigi are at their most useful when they have to be inside Bowser. You can make your own jokes from now on. I can't keep it up. Keep it up. Damn it!
There are tons of moments all throughout the game where Mario and Luigi will have to do something from within Bowser's body to help him complete a given task, like stimulate his muscles to make him strong enough to pull an entire island towards him, or push a giant drill through a wall to make a secret tunnel. This involves playing different mini-games, which include a shooting-based one where you're blasting balls of adrenaline to get Bowser's energy up, and tapping chunks of food on the touchscreen to help Bowser digest it. Yeah, you know how Partners in Time barely made you use the touchscreen at all? Well, that screen gets a lot of love in this game, as does the microphone, both of which are used during these sections where Bowser becomes giant as a result of the brothers reviving him after he's severely injured, and then he has to fight a giant boss. You drag the stylus across the screen to punch, and blow into the microphone to breathe fire. And I swear to God, one fight had me doing this so much that I actually got lightheaded after it was over and needed to take a break. My lungs used to be a lot stronger than this. I need to work out more. But speaking of taking breaks, there's another part where Bowser suffers from severe back pain, so Mario and Luigi drill into this little cranny between his bones to help him recover, and you actually have to put your DS down and wait a whole 2 minutes for this to be done. Apparently there's also a code you can input that speeds up the process, which Toadbert gives you when you talk to him in Toad Town. But since I was emulating this game, I just used the fast-forward feature to make this part go by quicker. Mario and Luigi can also help Bowser gain new abilities, allowing him to activate large switches by body slamming on top of them, and roll up into a ball to move across spikes, scale walls, and break through certain obstacles. But Bowser can also do things to affect Mario and Luigi's progress, like drinking water to let them swim around and reach higher places, or walking in front of this Boo-Ray machine to make certain blocks disappear. I like games that sort of cut themselves in half and make it so that what you do on one side leaves an impact on the other. And the way Bowser's Inside Story does it allows for some great little puzzle solving. The battle system is also split between Bowser and the brothers. Combat in general follows the same basic idea as the first two games, but now Mario and Luigi can both land 2 jump attacks in one go, if you press the action button at the right time. Badges don't work exactly as before. Now they're relegated to this meter on the bottom of the screen. Landing successful hits with both Mario and Luigi will have the meter fill up from both ends until the two badge icons meet in the middle. Then tapping them will give you an added bonus depending on which badges are out, so you can gain a brief attack boost or a certain amount of HP. Bowser doesn't have badges, but he makes up for that with more health and stronger attacks. He can also duck to avoid attacks from above, as well as damage enemies that try to jump on him. Then after Brock Monsieur gives him the vacuum block, he can suck up enemy weapons or even enemies themselves. I'm not sure why he couldn't just do that from the start after getting the vacuum mushroom, but once they get inside him, Mario and Luigi come back into play to take them on. Items and equipment are available to both the bros as well as Bowser, but now they can rank up after reaching a certain level, and the higher they rank up, the more accessories they can be equipped with. There's also this new item called a retry clock, and if you get a game over, it'll refill your stats, but then you have to start the battle over again.
And I only ever ended up using it once in the entire game, and that was just to get footage of it. So, there you go.
Bros attacks are back to how they were in Superstar Saga, acting as separate functions that require Bros points, or in this case special points, to use in battle. But how you unlock them is completely different. Bowser's Inside Story has these things called attack pieces, and by collecting 10 of them in a specific area, a new Bros attack will be made available. Then you can watch demo videos on the pause menu to see how each attack works, and you can practice using them as much as you want to help make you more familiar with them. I find it kinda strange how one of them is actually tied to story progression, and only one. That being the snack basket, which is 100% necessary to beat Chakron and get the star cure from him, because nothing else will work. After that, I don't remember using it much, or most of the other ones. I don't think I even used Spin Pipe at all. The Yoo-Hoo Cannon was great for targeting multiple foes at once, and Falling Star can do crazy amounts of damage, which makes it ideal for boss fights. Bowser gets his own special attacks too, but he doesn't get them from collecting attack pieces. Instead, he'll find groups of his minions locked in cages all over the kingdom, and after breaking them out, they'll give him some assistance in battle. So he can send a horde of flaming Goombas raining down on his foes, play a bit of Arkanoid with Koopa Troopas, or have a group of Shy Guys roll him up and fling him into enemies. Unlike the Mario Brothers, who have some really good ones, but mostly basic or not very reliable special attacks, Bowser's are all legitimately useful to some degree.
There's another attack he can use after finding all these little blitty creatures and bringing them back to Brock Monsieur, but I had less than 3 months to get this video done. I had to miss a couple things. Bowser's Inside Story is still widely considered to be the best in the series, and as much as part of me wishes I could have a different opinion from the general consensus, I have to agree. It really is such a great game. It's not perfect, obviously, but the characters are great, the writing is great, progression and combat are wonderfully built upon, and compared to the last game, it does a much better job at taking advantage of the system's capabilities. Being able to explore the inside of Bowser's body also gives the artists an opportunity to create surreal environments that really help keep things fresh. This game might also have my favorite soundtrack in the series, and I especially love how the music changes when you switch control between the brothers and Bowser. But you know what I just realized? Superstar Saga and Partners in Time were both released for the Wii U's Virtual Console, but Bowser's Inside Story wasn't. I'm not sure why this is, but since the original DS version ended up becoming the best-selling game in the series, that was clearly more than enough for Alpha Dream to give it a 3DS remake, which ironically became the worst-selling game in the series. Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey launched in late 2018, and though worldwide sales numbers have yet to be revealed, and probably never will be, Famitsu reported that the game only managed to sell 34,000 copies in Japan during its entire run. So not only is it the worst-selling Mario and Luigi game, it's one of the worst-selling games in the entire Mario franchise. In fact, it sold so poorly that, according to inside sources, it single-handedly killed the 3DS. So, Does that mean I'm technically holding a valuable collector's item? I guess not, since it doesn't go for much on the secondhand market. Alright then.
But holy crap, if it did so horribly, the game itself must be pretty bad. Well, actually, no, it's not. I mean, the frame rate was cut down from 60 FPS to 30, and microphone functionality was removed, so they might have had to take a few cost-cutting measures. But like with Superstar Saga on the 3DS, I think this might be better than the original in every other way. Everyone starts with 3 gear slots by default, you get new badges through story progression, and all these fancy new 3D cutscenes add some nice visual flair. My only gripe is that the timing for the bros attacks is a little different, and it kinda threw me off at first, but everything else is better. Not by much, but just enough to make this version worth your while. Critics seem to like it too, so why did this game flop so hard? Was it really because it came out at the tail end of 2018 when everyone's attention was squarely on the Nintendo Switch? Well, probably, yeah, but then again, the 3DS version of Luigi's Mansion came out around that time, and it still managed to sell over 27,000 copies in its first week, 3 times more than this game did in that same period. Maybe general interest in the series was waning by this point? I don't know, but what about that new Bowser Jr.'s Journey mode? It's Minion's Quest again. No, seriously, it's just a carbon copy of Minion Quest from the Superstar Saga remake, except Bowser Jr. is the only captain for the whole campaign. There are these new baddies called the Best Fitness Friends, which sounds like a cringy workout-based YouTube channel, and you get to add the Koopalings to your squad. That's kinda cool. But yeah, if you've played Minion Quest, you've played Bowser Jr.'s Journey. That's going to conclude part 2 of the Mario & Luigi series review. There's one more video left, and then I'm going to compile all the videos together into one big video. So next time, once we get into part 3, we're going to be covering the last of the Mario & Luigi games, Dream Team and Paper Jam. But for now, I want to thank my Superstar supporters for this month, Red Rack, Henry Newman, Rachel Rodriguez, and Jake Winans. So thank you for your support. I'll talk about the Patreon benefits at the end of the last part. So, yeah. That's that. And for now, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in part 3. Stay cool.